I know. I say it every week. Every week I say it gets better and better because I can't believe the wonderful guests we have on our show. Definitely, this is going to be one that knocks it out of the park again. I'm Michael Dismuke. I am a blogger on Continuing Missions, which is the #1 fan site for Star Trek Adventures RPG, Captain Log, and now the I actually can't announce. Oh, yes, I can announce it. Sorry, I'm thinking about the timing of our podcast of the Federation Klingon War Tactical Campaign 2, which is the biggest thing that was announced, in fact, this week when we recorded the show. I'm also a lead writer for Captain's Log and a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures RPG. And also coming soon, I have an article in Star Trek Explorer magazine, which I'm happy for the first time. And of course, all this could not have happened unless it was for Jim Johnson.
Hey, everybody, Jim Johnson. I am the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG and the Captain's Log solo RPG, both published by Modiphius Entertainment. Well, these many years, 8 years strong, 120 odd episodes with Michael on this weekly podcast here, which is super exciting. And we have had an opportunity over the last couple of years to get all kinds of amazing guests on the show, whether they're super fans, writers, artists, layout people, production people on the show. It's like all kinds of people somehow are willing to come on the show with us and talk. And we have a very special guest tonight that I am really, really excited to introduce. I'm here to introduce Heather Antos. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. And I want you to introduce yourself, but also as tradition here on the show, if you can introduce yourself, plug whatever is important that you would like to plug, and then tell us what your favorite Star Trek series is and your favorite Star Trek character.
Oh my gosh, so much pressure. Thank you guys so much for having me. Really excited to be here. For people who don't know who I am, I'm Heather Antos. I am the group editor of Licensed in Comics over at IDW Publishing, where for the last 2 years, almost 2 years, 2 years, I've been captaining all the Star Trek comic books over there. If you don't read Star Trek comics, I'd be confused as to why you're listening to this podcast. But if you do just read comics in general, I've worked on just under 1,000 comic books. So I guarantee you've probably read my work somewhere.
Awesome.
As for favorite series and favorite character, this is really, really tough. This is so tough because there's I don't know if you guys know, there's a lot of Star Trek.
A little bit. Yeah, we're a little familiar with it.
Yeah. This is so tough. If it was like gun to my head, I have to pick a show to watch right now, I'd probably say Strange New Worlds. It's definitely become like a comfort show for me. It's just, it is like, it's not allowed to be that good, like it's so good. Every episode is so good. I was not expecting to like ugly cry as much as I have during both seasons of that show. So yeah, definitely Strange New Worlds. And then favorite character, God, also very, very difficult.
Who keeps popping up in your mind? It has to be that person for now. It could change.
I have three.
Name them all.
So I'm obsessed with Badgie to a very unhealthy degree. I have a lot of Badgie memorabilia. Mariner and I think are very, very similar people. So I think I relate to Mariner the most. But Beverly Crusher is if I had to pick an all-time, I think Beverly Crusher is definitely like she's the beast. She's the best. Gates McFadden liked one of my tweets once and I screenshotted it and it saved in a folder for a rainy day when it's a bad day. If I ever got to meet her, I don't fangirl a lot when I meet celebrities, but like she's definitely one because like TNG I grew up on and like she was it for me. I think I would like definitely freak out a little bit if I.
Is that why you made sure she was standing here? For those who aren't watching us on YouTube, I'm pointing at Beverly Crusher as a character from the comic series.
Yeah, I mean, any of the Beverly Crusher centric covers you see out there for Star Trek were definitely hand chosen and picked by me because she's the best.
Very good. Those are great selections.
Yeah, absolutely. Great selection. I really always, I remember growing up with Next Generation, really appreciating Beverly. And I wish they had done more with her on the show. Cause like one of my favorite episodes is Remember Me, because there was just so much for her to do in that episode. I was like, why aren't they using her more and more and more? It's like, I mean, I know it's an ensemble cast and they had to focus on, Picard and Data more often than not. But it's like, man, there was so much that they could have had Crusher do beyond just being the mom to Wesley, right? So,
yeah, she
really
talks quite a bit about that on the Center Seat, that documentary, and kind of hear about the politics behind that. But now she's back in force thanks to IDW Publishing, which we're so happy about. I have to ask you, just for people who don't know, Heather, how did you get into the realm of comics, science fiction in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, I've just always kind of been around it my entire life. For comics, my mom would say I drew comics before I knew what comics were. I've been writing and illustrating my own stories literally since I was a little kid, and could hold a crayon. So that's just kind of always been a part of me. And then, like, I grew up, my dad shared TNG with me. He shared Indiana Jones, Star Wars. My favorite television show growing up was the 1960s Adam West Burt Ward Batman show. Like, it's just kind of always been a part of who I am. But I didn't realize that comics was a profession, a career path that you could have until I was like late into college. Growing up, I'm from a very, very small town in Michigan in the Midwest, where when we were bored, we went to Walmart to hang out. So on career day, you didn't have like, Dan Slott, writer of Spider-Man, come in to talk to the kids. That wasn't an option. And so when I was trying to figure out, my career path in life, a good friend of mine said very plainly, well, you like comics. Why don't you just do that?
So I didn't know it was that easy. Oh, cool.
Yeah. Just pick a job off the comics tree, And at that moment, something just clicked for me that, oh yeah, this is something I can do. And so I've always been a bit of a tenacious force. If I set my sights on something, I accomplish it, I do it. And I just really I began to research like the different career paths in comics and how to make a comic. And I started self-publishing and building my network. And from there, I got the attention of some editors at Marvel in time when they were about to relaunch that other Star franchise that shall not be mentioned here.
I like hearing that. Can you talk a little bit? We talk about it quite a bit here on the show. And Jim, add on to this question too, about how you have to write for yourself before you're ever going to write for anybody else. That we talk about how RPG is your chance to practice writing every single day, especially if you play like solo RPG or something, or creating narratives. So can you talk about how important it is just to get into the habit of writing before you are going to actually become a, say, freelance or professional writer?
Yeah. I mean, this is actually perfect, because before I got hired to work on Star Wars comics at Marvel, I was part of a 6-year-long Star Wars tabletop RPG campaign. And I'm still friends with all those guys to this days. You guys know how it is. It's family, and especially in comics, it translates to comics so much because comics is a team sport, as I like to say. There is no one role that is greater than the other. You need all parts equally in order to achieve your mission, so to speak. Just as you need that wizard, you need that rogue, you need that bard, and yes, you do need that bard, in order to raid that dungeon. And you need the improvisation skills of all the people involved. And so I think that the skills you develop when doing tabletop RPG definitely translate into comics, especially and IP, because you have the sandbox, right? You have the parameters, the toys of which you're allowed to play with. And yes, your DM may have a mission and may have rules and may have like a set course of plan. And then your players may decide, that's cute, we're going to go completely off the grid and do our own thing. And everyone's had that DM that is like, no, you have to do it my way. That's not fun. That's not fun for anyone. And so developing the improv skills, developing the teamwork and thinking on your feet and how to have an arc for your character, how to maintain a voice for your character that isn't just a projection of yourself, even though that's okay too sometimes. But especially when working with Star Trek, with Star Wars, with Batman, with Spider-Man, whatever, you have to be able to adapt to those worlds, those characters, those voices. And you get all of that in tabletop RPG.
I like that. I'm writing down a bunch of questions, Jim, just because I don't want to. I love.
I am
See,
too.
yeah. So we love talking about writing and RPG as literature here. So Jim, go first, and then I'll get my question in.
So really, this is all great information, Heather, and I'm loving it because like way back in the dark ages of the 1990s, when the comic industry was just like literally blowing up everywhere, and every comic company was doing more number ones than you can shake a stick at. Is like, oh, here's a new comic, and there was such a glut of stuff on the market, right? So my friends and I, of course, thought that was the right time to indie publish our own stuff. And so we did it on a dime, and it was like with black and white, and we just had to make it work. And we managed to get 3 issues out, and then we just couldn't compete with the huge
that's great though. That's hard. Getting one issue out is an accomplishment.
It was super hard. It was unbelievably difficult. But what I'm curious about, because you were talking a lot of writing stuff, like in terms of like voice and style and stuff. So I'm curious, like in your experience, like how does comic writing compare to like screenwriting or teleplays or novels or short stories? Like, I mean, I feel like a lot of it's all related. Like if you've got the basic building blocks, you can probably go into it. But maybe you could talk a little bit more about like how do you actually put together a comic script compared to like other types of writing and bring it to life?
Yeah, I love that question. Writing for different formats and different mediums is a lot like being a dancer and dancing different styles, right? It's all very similar. You're using the body, right? You're isolating different body parts, but doing hip hop is very different than dancing Swan Lake, right? It's all about understanding the format, and a lot of people, might think that, oh well, a comic script and like a movie script, they're both scripts, and they kind of look the same if you just look at it at a glance, right? But they're actually very, very different, and sometimes movie writers in particular can sometimes be some of the more difficult ones to train to write comics, because movies are, I don't know if you know this, moving pictures, right? And a comics panel is a static image. And so I have a collection of like some of the quote unquote worst panel descriptions I've ever read in scripts. And there's a script like from like years and years and years ago, like that before I was born. And it's like Captain America is standing on land and he throws his shield and so catches it and zooms in and he throws it back. And this is all in one panel.
Exactly. I've seen those.
Yeah. How does the camera zoom in one panel while he's throwing, while someone catches, right? That's like 3 different panels right there. A single panel is a single action, a single shot. And so you have to keep those fundamental building blocks in mind. The other thing is that a comic book is roughly around 20 pages. That's not a lot. You might think like, oh my God, I have to write 20 pages. That's so much, but it's really not a lot of space in order to tell very complex stories, and sometimes dual stories with multiple characters. And how many people do you have to fit in a panel? And oh my God, someone has to draw this, right? Someone has to draw this teensy little panel with 7 people in it and 27 word balloons, right? There's all of these little things that you don't think about that need to be considered when constructing your story. You have to think about page turns, right? You want, I always suggest a right-hand page, your odd number pages are your page turns. And so that last panel, I always suggest to writers who are starting out, you want that to end on an action, someone reaching for a door, someone about to pull a sword out of a sheath. So, give me a reason to turn that page, right? And you always want your splash pages to fall on the left-hand side, your even page numbers, because you want to turn into a reveal, a moment. You want to make sure those moments are earned, right?
Do you teach a course on this, by the way? I know you teach courses. Is this one of the courses you teach?
I don't. I talk to a lot of students and talk about this stuff on podcasts like this. But I've been doing this a long time, so
well, I love it. I had worked through the Comic Creator Network through San Diego Comic Con and produced my own graphic novel, did 2 Kickstarters on it. And
congratulations.
It was painful, but believe me, it was, I look back on it, it was the worst work I've ever done, but it was the best training I ever had. Because working with the artist, which I really appreciated, she was really talented, Susan Sheng. She was out of the San Francisco Academy there of Arts. And she took on the role of being both line artist and colorer, and it was just, I felt so bad after. And the reason I say this, because there was a point I wrote down, you talked about playing RPG as a group is a collaborative operation, just like working with a team of comic book writers. And I want to kind of clinch on that for a little bit, because we've all seen it in the art industry where someone maybe is a fantastic writer, or maybe they're a fantastic line letterer. They're fantastic at one thing, but they're not a fantastic team player. Mm-hmm. And so I want to talk about the chops again, that RPG. Let's go back to that a little bit more, because I don't know if you've heard, Jim Modifius produced a book called The Game Master's Guide and the Player's Guide. And it was all about being the best you can be at those. So talk to us a little bit about that for the aspiring writers out there, what they should really be doing in the way of collaboration around the table.
Yeah, for writers in general, I always suggest for them to remember that someone has to draw this at the end of the day. And it might take you 5 minutes to write a splash page, and your splash page is an entire army is running down a mountain on horses. Every single person has bows and arrows and cannons and swords, and it's raining, and there's lightning, and there's a flock of birds, and you can see every blade of grass, and right? That took me 15 seconds to spew out. Now someone has to draw those hundreds of horses, those hundreds of people, those hundreds of weapons, those thousands of blades of grass, those raindrops, and compose it in a way that looks cool, and can fit the word balloons. And that takes a very long time to do. And now, if the subsequent pages and sequences are the battle scene of these hundreds of horses and hundreds of swords and right? It's a lot, right? And we do have these, we have these moments, we have these sequences, we have these comics, and they're necessary for sure. But if that is your entire 20 pages, oh my God, that poor artist. I also think too, it's being a creator is a narcissistic pursuit in and of itself. It just is, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's, we want to tell our stories and put our stories out in the world so the world can pat us on the back and tell us what a good job we did. And that's just being a creator. And that's okay. But a lot of times, especially beginning writers, are thinking so much about, this is my vision and my story, and I want it my way, my dance monkey dance, draw my book, right? Which is kind of inhumane and disrespectful for the amount of craft and skill that it takes an artist to produce the work. And so a lot of times, I often say as a writer, a really good way to get an artist to work with you that might not work with you otherwise, that you really want to work with and maybe can't afford their full rate and, whatever, is to ask that artist, what do you want to draw? What is something you've always wanted to draw? And I might be like, I really love penguins, and no one has given me a story that's just all about penguins. I would really love to draw a story about penguins. I got you, Heather. I will write a story about penguins for you to draw. Right. And then you're going to get their best work because it's something they're very enthusiastic and want to do.
I love that advice.
Yeah. So a related question then. So like I know, in writing, short story writers, novelists, and stage writers, right? Stage play writers. Like the writer is the king or the queen, the goddess. The words don't change unless that writer says yes, you can change that. By and large, right? But stage plays or screenplays, teleplays, and it sounds like comic books too is super collaborative, where you really need to be working together with a team to make things happen. And you change, like, I mean, we know from Star Trek, right? They're constantly changing the script and getting different colored pages every day that they need to, pull together. So I was curious if you could speak from, like, obviously the comic perspective, like how collaborative is it for a writer? Like, obviously the writer needs to understand the language to some extent and needs to understand how panels work and how you can make things flow in panel to panel or page to page. So like in your experience, are writers like really trying to think, like obviously they're writing their story, right, and they're writing their dialogue and they're writing their descriptions, but are they trying to think in terms of like panels? Because like I would think as a writer, if I'm collaborating with an artist, I would want to, I mean, we do it at Modifius, right? When I write art briefs for our artwork, I try to give the artist a sense of what we're looking for, but I don't want to be so prescriptive that they're feeling like they're boxed into what they must create, because I want to give them the creativity and the freedom to make something cool, because that's why we're hiring them, obviously, right? So like how much flexibility is there, and do your writers understand that there's going to be some give and take there?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a varying degree of this,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
I think Alan Moore is pretty infamously known for the amount of detail he puts into his scripts, right? If you've ever read an Alan Moore script of like Watchmen, V for Vendetta, whatever, if there is a bookshelf in the panel. And you can see the title of the book on that bookshelf. Alan Moore wrote in that script how many books are on that bookshelf and exactly which pages are torn and what titles are on there. If there's a half-eaten apple on that table on the desk and a coffee cup spilled over, Alan Moore wrote that in that script to be like that, right? There are some writers that are very, very meticulous and very intentional. And you know what? I think Alan Moore's done okay for himself as a writer. I think it worked out for him. But then there are other writers that I think and Warren Ellis is one that comes to mind, where his scripts are, and Batman walked into a room, right? And then you have the artist here's this huge theater that's drawn from a fisheye lens and a chandelier and all of these things, right? That was not in the script at all, which is fine and great, and that's awesome. That's part of the beauty of those collaborations. And so, in comics, you tend to find, like in film, television, other collaborative creative forms, you find teams that tend to stick together and work together a lot, and it's because they found this alchemist sort of relationship that really works well together. And so, you just have varying degrees of this in things like Star Trek, right? In IP, there's definitely a level of rigidity solely of the fact that it is an IP, it is a franchise that none of the creators working on it own. So at the end of the day, the licensor has a lot more say, and what we can adjust, what we can't show, what we, you need to show it this way, X, Y, and Z. But I'm working on a really cool arc right now of Star Trek with Jackson and Colin, where we're doing some really, really weird stuff, and getting to see, there's stuff where Jackson and Colin write it in the panels, and I'm just like, very curious to see how this turns out. I have no idea how we're going to draw this, right? And then we send it to our artist, who hasn't been announced yet, so I can't say. But like, getting pages in my inbox are just like some of the coolest things, because I never would have pictured it in this way. Seeing their interpretation of these like really weird stuff that we're doing is so cool. And that's part of the fun. There's a level of trust, right? Same with your tabletop RPGs, right? There's a level of trust you have with your team that I'm going to throw you something weird, right? It's that trust fall, and you're going to catch me. You're going to catch me and throw me back.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because they came on our show a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things they talked about is how years of tabletop RPG and them being in a team together informs their comic writing now. And there was something you said that I want to ask you about, because you said that, the GM can build the best game in the world. The player is going to break it, right? Mm-hmm. And I tell Jim all the time that whenever I go into a game as a player, I'm trying to, or I'm trying to write a story. I want to break things and make the heroes fix it. So with that said, you said that kind of translates into the comic world again. And now you just hit it, talking about the kind of stories that are dropping in your inbox. How does that work in a comic realm where someone's trying to, you said, play outside the rules, especially for an established IP like Star Trek? How do you do it so that it still gets, it slides into home plate without getting smacked back too hard? Jim, we get edited a lot, and his take on it too is good, because I know we get slapped back a lot sometimes from the IP. So how do you deal with that and still try to get your story birthed?
Yeah. Again, trust is a lot of it. It's so funny, because when I started working on Star Trek, I was warned, like, they're tough. Paramount's tough, man. Paramount's really tough. They say no to a lot of things. And just to pat myself on the back, they've never said no to a single thing I've pitched them to this date. Or the only times they've ever said no is, no, we can't, because of this is happening in a show. Right. Yeah. And it's building that trust that, with things like IP, we are going to put the toys back in the box, right? We're not going to break your babies. Or the babies that they do let us break, it's done intentionally and with care. And I think that's a lot of it at the end of the day with an IP is to build that trust with the IP holder. Jackson and Colin have been working with Star Trek for a very long time, for instance, that, the folks over there like trust that they know what they're doing. And so we get to play and do some really weird stuff that I can't believe we get to do all the time, always. And it's been really, really fun in that regard. But I often view, I'm a stickler for planning. There's a lot of times where like writers just kind of like write and do their thing and turn the script in. And I'm so big on breaking a story before a script is written and having like an outline as tight as possible. And that'll start with, give me a 2-sentence pitch of what you want the story arc to be. Right. Because if that 2-sentence doesn't hook me, if I'm not interested in it, I'm not, why are you going to write a 5-issue outline? Do not waste my time. Do not waste your time. Cool. We have that 2-sentence. All right. Give me a 1-sheet. Right. Cool. We have a 1-sheet. We're happy with that. Give me an outline for the whole arc. And then we'll break down every single issue, from there. And once that's done, then we'll go to script. But even sometimes when we hit a script, right, what worked in the outline doesn't work on the page, and we might need to recalibrate. And I often compare it to whether it's, whether I'm working on IP or creator-owned stuff. As your editor, I'm Google Maps. I'm Google Maps trying to find the best route to the destination. And we know what the destination is. We know where we want to end up. But do we want the scenic route? Do we want the most fuel efficient route? Do we want to take the route with tolls, right? Which are the routes we're ending up on? And sometimes, there's road construction. Sometimes there's an accident. Sometimes we take a wrong turn, right? Let's recalibrate. Let's find the best path forward. And sometimes that means deviating from that original outline and coming up with a new route together.
I love everything you're saying as an outliner for everything I do as much as possible, except maybe short stories. But even with a short story, I'll do a couple of bullet points or a couple of sentences just so I can get my head wrapped around where I'm starting, where I'm going, and where I want to end. Right. But for like novels and stage plays and teleplays, I need an outline. Otherwise, I go way off into the weeds, and I'm like, now where am I? I'm 60,000 words into a novel. I have no idea where I'm going. I'm wasting my time. And then there's just so much more work work to recalibrate and get it going.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, even though you're working on a 20-page script, you still got, I mean, sure, it's still a lot of work to make it all happen. So it's just fascinating to hear the process. And also it's fascinating to hear your perspectives about working with Paramount, because it's very similar to how we roll, where like, I think 98% of the time they don't say no to anything really, because they, you know, they trust us that we're respecting the property, we love the property. And I think the only times we've really gotten to know is when we want to put somebody's likeness into a piece of artwork and they don't have the rights, or the estate doesn't want to use that likeness or something, and we're like, oh darn it, okay, well, we'll find another route to this or something. I think the only challenge that we've really had with Paramount ever is with the Lower Decks book that we did. They had some very specific notes on that, because in some places we weren't funny enough, and in some places we took Badgie a little too far. Like I was thinking Badgie, you could be as malicious as you want with that, but Mike McMahon really helped us kind of like dial it in a little bit. So I am so grateful for how knowledgeable that team is, and I'm sure you're getting it even more so, because you're doing both visuals and story, right? So you got, and you're doing visuals far more than we are, right? I mean, we're doing a bunch of half-page illustrations in our books, but you're doing, I mean, your stuff is visual all the time, right? So a really fascinating perspective, Heather. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, no, it's a team. It's just that team sport, right? That's and Paramount's a big part of that. They're part of that team.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thankful because you brought Harry Kim back fighting dinosaurs, and so that storyline there. Yeah, I was just like, you know, I could cry when I saw that scene, which is really good.
I'm glad people responded well to Harry Kim coming back, because when Jackson and Colin first pitched that, bringing him back and you know, that capacity, and he's not just ensign Harry Kim anymore, I was like, I don't know about this, guys. I don't know. Like,
it had to happen. Everyone talks about it.
This could go one of two ways.
That is hilarious. And let's talk a little bit about, you know, some of the characters, because we're big into character development, of course, in RPG, and people love developing their characters. They love these story arcs you mentioned. And, you know, even looking for those of you who aren't, you know, watching us on YouTube, but dialing in, you know, we're looking at this fantastic cast of characters, two which were new characters introduced and created. Did Jody Hauser create some of these characters too? Or was it just Jackson and Colin on these? Okay, I just want to make sure I give credit where credit's due. So let's talk about that. How did you pick what people are calling the Avengers of Star Trek?
Yeah.
What was part of the formula behind that, and how can that inform players to create really distinct characters?
Yeah. All credit to this cast, to Jackson and Colin and Chris Cantwell and the Defiant book. You know, I went to Jackson and Colin originally and was like, pitch me Star Trek, no subtitle. We called it Star Trek no colon for a very long time. And find who are the Avengers of Star Trek? What does that look like? And I left that totally up to them to do, and they were the ones who came back to me with Benjamin Sisko, you know, as our Iron Man, essentially, right? Like as our head of this crew. And I loved that. I was so excited with that pick, solely because, you know, I think a lot of people, most people, especially casual viewers, right, will say, well, Kirk or Picard, right? Those are you know, who you pick. And so having this very amazing leader, but he's also very emotionally driven. You know, you never quite know which Benjamin Sisko reaction you're going to get in some moments, whether he's going to be really quiet or whether he's going to be, you know, very expressive and passionate, you know, whatever. And I love that. I loved him coming forward. But I was from the very, very beginning, I was pretty emphatic that I wanted new faces. I wanted new characters in there. Because one, if there are characters that we create, then we get to decide their fate. And when you're having a Crusher, a Data, a Sisko in this time period, well, we know Crusher ends up in Picard season 3, so nothing can happen to her. Well, we know Benjamin Sisko never comes back, you know, that Lower Decks episode, they say he hasn't come back down from the wormhole yet. So like he's still up there. We know Data dies and Nemesis, right? We know all of these things. And so, that keeps their fates, their stakes, right? These things like not as quote unquote dangerous as they could be. But when we add Talir, when we add Dashini, when we add Lily, right? When we add all of these new faces, and we learn to love them and become endeared to them. Then when we see what happens with Lily in Glass and Bone, right, in the Zenkathi arc, we're heartbroken, right? When we see what happens, I'll give a little tease. When we see what happens between Lily and Talir's friendship in the next arc, we don't know what's going to happen there, right? Like, and it gives us a lot of angles to explore their perspective of this universe in a way that we don't know.
And so so what would your advice be to character development for a person around the table, especially with your experience in RPG too?
Yeah, I'm definitely a lead with your intuition, lead with your gut, right? It's understanding core moral thoughts of your characters. I think really understanding what motivates them, what they want, right? What their quote unquote red flags are, what their biggest flaws are, and where their moral high ground, so to speak, lies. What is the line in the sand that they will not cross? What is the line in the sand that they will cross if someone hands them $1 million, right? Gives them the thing they most want. And knowing those will inform the choices that the characters make. And I think making choices is such a strong component of that. Interesting characters make interesting choices. Boring characters don't make choices. No one likes a passive character. Or if a character is passive, are they choosing to be passive, and why are they choosing to be passive? What's the intention behind choosing to stand back, right? And it's these thoughts and these choices and thinking those through really inform who your character is and how you can stay true to that. That's a lot of my theater background coming out, but I think, but that it's true. It's, our choices reflect who we are and inform who we are as just human beings, and what are our characters, who are our characters, if not human beings or whatever species in their own right.
Yeah, this is tying right into so in Star Trek Adventures, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to play it or check it out, but every character has a set of values, and those values define who that person is in a very important way. And then during the course of the game, they can challenge those values or test those values, and those values will change, right? As they experience life and realize that maybe that value wasn't the most effective thing, and I need to rethink it, and I need to rejigger it. Then they grow and they develop and they change. And I know we often tell our players, really lean into your values, because that is what defines your character, even more so than the mechanical numbers and that kind of stuff. So it's just fascinating to hear you saying this. That's really cool. Michael, did you have another question for Heather?
Yeah, I have one from me and one from a fan also, because so we'll get to that. But I have to ask this just because it's happening now. We've had Thomas Maroney on our show, STO, our lead art director for STO. Derek Tyler Attico, he just wrote the Cisco novel. I don't know if you've had the chance to read it. It's amazing. Jackson, Jody, Eric Campbell, who played RPG and their ship ended up in Picard. So what would you do if some of these characters that you're creating in the comics, I'm going to put some happiness into the universe, some wish in the universe for you, ended up actually in canon? I know you brought Shax into the comic, right? But what if it works back? Possibility? How would you feel?
I mean, anything is possible, right? It would be, it's surreal. I had something similar happen working on Star Wars. Working on Star Wars, one of the characters I helped bring forward in the comics, Black Chrysanthemum, ended up on the Book of Boba Fett show.
Whoa.
I cried. I couldn't compute, I couldn't process it happening. And then, there's this Wookiee that I helped bring, to life in the comics. end up on TV. I think I was a little more excited when I found out he ended up in Fortnite and I got to buy his skin and play him in Fortnite than I was when he was on TV. That's just me. But anything is possible. We work so closely with Mike McMahon. We work so closely. I got to get to know Terry Metalis a lot. When he was doing the Picard 3, because I don't know if we use a lot of those characters in these comics, and so getting to intertwine with all of that, getting to work with the folks doing Strange New Worlds, like all of these things, so I work very closely with everyone involved. So nothing is out of the realm of possibility. It happens all of the time. And the USS Theseus just appeared in the STO game, which that was really cool that they wanted to put our ship from our comic into that game. That was so cool.
That is cool. This is okay. So then I have to do this for Jim, because Jim's not going to ask and I am. Okay, so I'm not sure how familiar you are with the world that was built kind of by Dayton Ward, Scott Pearson, Derek Tyler Attico. They all kind of input for this thing called the Shackleton Expanse, and Star Trek, the IP, gave Jim and back then Nathan Dowdell the permission to build a whole side of on the far side of the Beta Quadrant called the Shackleton Expanse. The game kind of owns that. Everyone in RPG is saying, when is it going to show up somewhere? Comic book. So I'm putting this out into the universe for Jim. Shackleton Expanse. Just those two words, and we can cry.
I don't know. I've been bugging Dayton for years to just drop it into a novel, because he writes a bunch of the Star Trek novels, right? So it's like, please just one little throwaway line somewhere just to connect the dots, because we love working with all the other licensors, right? Or licensees. Like we worked with STO, we worked with Star Trek Timelines, we've worked with a little bit with IDW when we had the opportunity to do the Year 5 supplement. And it's like, come on, Dayton, just put one little line, some throwaway dialogue from some character who was there for a little while, but hasn't quite happened yet. So we'll see.
Oh man, when I talk with Dayton Monday, I'm just gonna say, Dayton, I have 2 words for you: Shackleton Expanse, just to see how he responds.
Oh, please record that and get it.
I'll try.
Like a one shot.
Yeah.
Or a what do they call them? Ash can, right?
There you go.
Do a 10-page ash can.
He might cry. You may actually give him a heart leap if you do that. Please tell me how that turns out. I just got to know.
I will.
So along that same line, the question that came from Al Spader, he's actually one of the freelance writers. He's a game creator. He created something called Sentience, but he had a question for you, which I don't even know what the question means. So I'm going to hope you know what it means, because I would say I'm the average geek. I'm not like the full-in geek. I just want to admit that. So he was asking, can we create missions that they illustrate as comics like The Last God did at DC? Like imagine a Picard's Academy STA supplement, but as a comic book with their artists. I don't know what that question means.
I don't know either.
Jim, do you know?
I will admit I am not as big of a geek as Al, apparently, because I'm not quite sure what he's talking about.
He said that, so I've just one last sentence of explanation. The Last God released a 5e world guide and adventure in comic format with their artists doing the art. Might be cool to do something like that with IDW.
Oh, it sounds like it was something that was like a fan-made adventure that they made into a comic book.
Okay. I don't know.
That's kind of how I'm interpreting that.
Mm-hmm.
I could be entirely wrong. All of this to say, it's probably unlikely.
Since we don't know what the hell you're talking about, Al.
well, but also, like the comics are considered, they're canon in their own right, like in our own universe, right? We have our own canon in the comics, and so, everything goes through the licensor and like fan made. It becomes a very tricky legally. Basically, all of this to say is it becomes very tricky legally, and so that probably won't happen because of that. It's why we can't print fan art, right? And a lot of this stuff, it becomes very, very tricky legally. So,
I think in response to Al tangentially, I think the two things that are maybe possible, and Heather, you can certainly push back and say no, that's not going to happen, is if we were to like write a standalone adventure or something, right, and commission a handful of pieces of art in the comic style, right, and use that as our art instead of commissioning the
create a zine. Like,
or
you know,
zine. Yeah.
do your
And then
own.
the other thing is we would do another version, not another version of year 5, but use year 5 as a model to where once you have a series that's complete and in the can, we could talk about that and say, hey, we did a year 5 supplement and it was super fun and the fans ate it up. And IDW was so super generous letting us use all the artwork, which was a godsend, seriously, because the art is so fantastic. Do something like that. Like if you have a series that's completed and done, and we could do a supplement that relates to that series. That way, it's still using the stuff that's already approved by the licensor in both directions. All kinds of possibilities. It just depends on bandwidth, I think, and
Yeah.
interest.
Yeah. I think, having something that was completely a fan made story then to be published, like it just becomes a tricky legal thing.
Yep,
Really.
understood.
That's just all. Unfortunately, that's, but all of that to say, create your own stuff,
Mhm.
that's some of the coolest Star Trek comic things I've seen have been like fan made things that I've seen at conventions that are super super cool that we couldn't publish for one reason or another, because
Mhm.
rules, but it's still super cool.
Yeah. We encourage people, if they're really passionate about something, just do it. Right.
Yeah. One of one
Yeah.
of the coolest Star Trek comics out there is Martok by Daniel Warren Johnson, and it is not an official comic in any way, shape, or form. It was his
Ooh.
fan made comic that he did just because he loves Klingons. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm. I mean, that's my encouragement to people, especially with Michael, because Michael, when Star Trek Adventures came out in 2017, Michael was a co owner or a co whatever, I don't know what you call it, Michael, but he ran
Co-blogger.
co-blogger. He ran a fan website called Continuing Mission, which was just creating amazing fan made supplements
Mhm.
for the game, just for the love of it, and that's how I noticed his work. And I reached out to him. I said, "Hey, you're doing some amazing fan stuff. Do you want to write for the game?" And
Yeah.
I brought him in that way.
And
And
after I urinated myself.
well, we didn't need to know that.
But no, that's true. I mean,
Yeah.
again, Daniel Warren Johnson, who is one of the most sought after and biggest comics,
Mhm.
writers and artists out there right now, like he got noticed and he got his start, not just because of his own creator owned work, but he did he did the Martok comic that he did on his own, and he just like self-published it and sold it at conventions. He also did what was it, Green Leader, which was his Star Wars fan comic, and those like got very very popular and caught the attention of
Mhm.
folks like me and other editors out there, and
Right.
yeah, now he's big shot. So
Uh-huh.
um
That's a good
uh
story. And
yeah, your fan stuff, like it might not ever get published by the IP, but it can get eyes on it, right?
Yep.
And that can lead to getting jobs. Jennifer Heddle is a great writer. Again, on the Star Wars side, but she got hired because of relationships she built back when she was in the fan fiction community.
Mhm.
Being a good writer is being a good writer, whether it's fan fiction, whether it's your own self-published stuff, whether it is writing Spider-Man for Marvel.
Yeah.
It all takes the same craft, same skill, same discipline, same dedication.
Yeah.
So you're never going to get there unless you write that, what was it, 10,000 hours, right?
Yeah.
So you better start now.
Yep. Or for novelists, is write a million words and then you'll be going somewhere, right?
Yeah.
You got to put the work in. But I think it also ties into what you were saying earlier, Heather, about working with an artist and finding what they're passionate about. Like if you put your passion into your work and you're just publishing it for the love and just getting it out there, someone's going to notice it and they're going to see that passion, woven all throughout all the work that you're doing, and then it might open doors. So it's just exciting to hear that. So I think we've kept you long enough, and you've been super generous with your time. We really appreciate that. We wanted to try to keep this under an hour because Michael and I would go on all night, continuing conversation just forever with you. So we want to be respectful of that. So what we do at the end here is we just say some final words, and then we do some gratitude. So I think we'll just go around, and Michael, why don't you kick us off with some final words, and then your gratitude.
Sure. I have to give my gratitude to the team you formed. You formed the Avengers of comic writers and producers and editors and artists, because again, I was talking to Jackson and Connor the other day. I said, would you stop writing for a month just so I can catch up? There's so much out there right now. And what you're doing in your leadership role is really bringing Star Trek alive in such a fresh, palatable way. And I just really appreciate it. It's very impactful, especially for those of us who love writing so much. You're giving us a lot of good fodder to work with. And I really hope that there's a closer relationship between all these entities and different things more and more as the futures go. So thank you so much, Heather, for your leadership on that. And I love just the fact that you've worked from your passion all these years to get there. It's just so cool. All right. Back to you, Heather. Who's your gratitude to?
Oh my gosh, my gratitude is just to the world and just the fans, the opportunity to get to tell these stories and work in these worlds, and the response over the last. I just realized I've been in comics professionally for 10 years. As of next week, actually, and to meet fans at shows and have people like tell me how much my work has impacted them and connected them and in different ways, and they feel seen with, you know, these characters that a lot of us might think like, oh, that's just a character from a TV show, but you know, we're all fans of characters for a reason, right? There is all a character that we see ourselves in, and to be a part of someone seeing themselves in the greater IP is just like so humbling. And to have the platform that I have where I get to impact these worlds that so many people are connected to. It's just, I'm very grateful for that opportunity. And you know, I tell these stories and treat these characters with a lot of care because, you know, I'm a fan too.
Amen to that. Absolutely. Thank you, Heather. Really appreciate that. I am grateful to you and to everybody at IDW and Colin and Jackson, and I mean literally the entire Star Trek family. Right? We have been so lucky to have so many amazing people be willing to talk to us on the show, and like from the production people who are working on the actual television shows, you know, and then and you folks and artists and designers and just, you know, Thomas Maroney and everyone like has that Star Trek family vibe, right? Where we're all so generous with each other and we take the care to talk to each other and just share insights and anecdotes and just the love for the franchise, right? That's been around for almost 60 years and we're all just in love with it. And it's just so amazing. And I'm so grateful that somehow everyone finds time to work with each other, and it kind of brings all the different licensees together into kind of a sort of cohesive whole. And I know that, you know, spending a lot of time on social media with the fans, like they get it, they see it, right? They see the connections between STO and the comics and the role-playing game and all this other stuff. And then even, you know, STO into canon, right? Where they brought those ships into the last season of Picard. And it's like, ooh, that started off as actually Eric Campbell's ship was started off life in the RPG, and then it got into STO, and then from STO it went into the TV show, right? So, and all that happens because all of us are talking to each other, and we're this little community within the bigger Star Trek family community. And I'm just grateful for everybody, and for you, of course, for taking the time to talk with us. And then I never say it enough, but I'm grateful to the fans, right? Because without the fan base that we all have, that we share, we wouldn't be doing any of this cool stuff. And so grateful to the fans for being supportive of all the different licensees and the game and the comics and everything else, because we're here for you, and we're all, and I can hear it in your voice, Heather, you are trying to be a good shepherd of your piece of the franchise, and we're doing the same thing over here. And I know, you know, Dayton's doing his part on the novels, and it's just great to see Star Trek is very healthy and very alive right now, and it's just a really great place to be.
And you win the award just because you brought back Harry Kim. So you're good for the next 55 years. 55 years, you're good. All right. Cool. So with that said, the conversation continues. Again, thank you, Heather, for coming on. Until next time, IDIC.
Live long and prosper. Be safe, be well, and we'll talk to you all next time.